Sable Montgomery laughed mockingly as she gripped the pen, her eyes filled with contempt as she looked at Dante. The husband she believed would never give her the luxurious life she craved. "Finally, I'm free from you," she said with satisfaction. But as she signed her name on that fateful document, she had no idea she was abandoning a billion-dollar fortune. Dante Kingsley, with his modest appearance as an accountant, was actually hiding an extraordinary family legacy that could have given her everything she'd ever dreamed of. Would Sable realize her deadly mistake when it was already too late? Before we continue with Dante's shocking story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more dramatic tales like this one. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Are you in Chicago, Nairobi, Mumbai, or Rome? Your support means everything to our storytelling community. Now let's dive back into Dante's world and discover how his hidden wealth will turn everything upside down. The alarm clock buzzed at 6:30, and Dante Kingsley rolled over in their cramped two-bedroom apartment on Chicago's South Side. His wife Sable was already gone, probably left early for her shift at Luxe Beauty Salon downtown. The empty coffee cup on her nightstand and the lingering scent of her expensive perfume were the only traces of her presence. Dante stretched his tall frame and prepared for another day at Henderson & Associates, the small accounting firm where he'd worked for 3 years, earning a modest $45,000 annually. As he buttoned his crisp white shirt in the bathroom mirror, Dante caught sight of the Patek Philippe watch hidden in his sock drawer, a $200,000 gift from his father that he'd never worn around Sable. She would ask questions he wasn't ready to answer. The watch represented everything he'd walked away from when he chose love over legacy, simplicity over the suffocating world of billion-dollar boardrooms and endless family obligations. Sable returned home that evening with her usual air of frustration, her designer handbag, bought on credit, swinging from her shoulder as she kicked off her heels. She was a striking woman with flawless dark skin and an ambitious spirit that had initially drawn Dante to her. But lately that ambition had transformed into something bitter and resentful. She scrolled through Instagram while Dante prepared dinner, her face growing more sullen with each post of friends vacationing in Bali or showing off new designer purchases. "Look at this," Sable said, holding up her phone to show Dante a photo of her friend Rebecca posing next to a Mercedes-Benz. "Her new husband bought her that for their anniversary. What did I get? A dinner you cooked at home." She set the phone down with obvious irritation and picked at the homemade pasta Dante had spent an hour preparing. He'd even bought her favorite wine with money he'd saved from skipping lunches, but she barely acknowledged the gesture. Dante reached across their small dining table and touched her hand gently. "Sable, you know I'm working towards something better. The firm is talking about promoting me to senior associate. That would mean a decent raise, maybe enough for us to move to a nicer place." His voice carried genuine hope, but Sable pulled her hand away and continued staring at her phone. The distance between them felt wider than the few inches of table space. "When, Dante? When will that happen?" Sable's voice rose slightly. "I'm 32 years old. I watch women come into the salon every day wearing jewelry that costs more than we make in 6 months. They talk about their weekend trips to Napa, their shopping sprees in Milan. Meanwhile, I'm clipping coupons and wearing the same dress to every event because it's the only decent thing I own." The argument that followed was familiar territory, Sable's dreams of luxury crashing against Dante's modest reality. What she didn't know was that with one phone call, Dante could have bought her a dozen Mercedes vehicles or flown her to Milan for the weekend. But he'd learned the hard way that money attracted people for the wrong reasons. His father's endless parade of gold-digging associates and fair-weather friends had taught him that lesson early and painfully. After dinner, Dante retreated to their tiny home office to work on client files. The space was barely large enough for a desk and chair, but it was his sanctuary. Hidden beneath a stack of tax documents was a manila envelope containing legal papers that could change their lives instantly, documents transferring control of Kingsley Empire to him upon his 36th birthday, now just months away. He'd been avoiding his father's lawyers for weeks, hoping somehow he could build a life with Sable that didn't require revealing his true identity. The phone rang at 9:15, and Dante answered without checking the caller ID. "Son, we need to talk." Marcus Kingsley's deep voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "The board is growing impatient. You have obligations, responsibilities that can't be postponed indefinitely." Dante moved to the bedroom doorway, ensuring Sable couldn't overhear. She was in the living room, lost in another social media scroll session, occasionally sighing dramatically at posts that reminded her of everything she felt she was missing. "I'm not ready, Dad," Dante whispered into the phone. "I need more time to figure things out here." His father's silence spoke volumes, and Marcus Kingsley hadn't built a $12 billion empire by accepting excuses or delays. "Time is a luxury you no longer have," his father replied before the line went dead. Dante stared at the phone, feeling the weight of two worlds pressing down on him: the simple life he'd chosen and the empire that awaited his return. Sable appeared in the doorway, her expression curious but tinged with suspicion. "Who was that calling so late?" she asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't particularly interested in his answer. Dante quickly slipped the phone into his pocket and forced a smile. "Just a client with some last-minute questions about their tax filing," he lied smoothly. "Nothing important." But as Sable turned away, Dante caught sight of her reflection in the bedroom mirror. She was frowning, and he realized she'd heard more of his conversation than she'd let on. Later that night, as Sable slept beside him, Dante lay awake staring at the ceiling. Through the thin apartment walls, he could hear their neighbors arguing about money, their voices carrying the same desperation and frustration that had colored his own conversation with Sable earlier. He thought about the life he could give her if he revealed the truth: penthouses, private jets, unlimited shopping budgets. But he also remembered the loneliness of growing up surrounded by people who only valued him for his father's wealth. The next morning, Sable was unusually quiet during breakfast. She kept glancing at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, part curiosity, part calculation. As he prepared to leave for work, she finally spoke. "Dante, that phone call last night. I heard you mention family assets and your father's decisions. Is there something you're not telling me?" Her question hung in the air like a challenge, and Dante felt his carefully constructed, simple life beginning to crack at the foundation. The tension from Sable's probing question lingered throughout the following weeks, like smoke from an extinguished fire. Dante deflected her curiosity with careful responses about office politics and family business matters, but he could see the seeds of suspicion taking root in her mind. Meanwhile, Sable's dissatisfaction with their modest lifestyle intensified, particularly after her friend Rebecca began flaunting her relationship with a wealthy tech entrepreneur who showered her with expensive gifts and exotic vacations. At Luxe Beauty Salon, Sable found herself increasingly drawn to the conversations and lifestyle of Marcus Thompson, a successful investment banker who frequented the salon for executive grooming services. Thompson was everything Dante wasn't: flashy, confident about his wealth, and eager to discuss his expensive tastes and business conquests. He drove a silver Porsche that he parked deliberately in front of the salon's large windows, ensuring everyone could admire it while he received his treatments. "You know, Sable," Thompson said during one of his appointments, his voice carrying the practiced charm of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted, "a woman with your beauty and intelligence deserves so much more than struggling to make ends meet. Life's too short to settle for mediocrity." His words struck a chord with Sable's growing resentment about her financial circumstances. She found herself looking forward to his visits, not just for his generous tips, but for the glimpse into a world where money wasn't a constant source of stress and limitation. Dante sensed the growing distance between them and attempted to bridge the gap by suggesting a weekend getaway to Wisconsin, thinking a change of scenery might rekindle their connection. But Sable's response was sharp and dismissive. "With what money, Dante? Are we going to camp in the woods because that's all we can afford?" Her sarcasm cut deep, especially since Dante could have easily booked them a luxurious resort suite without making a dent in his hidden trust fund. The irony of denying her dreams while possessing the means to fulfill them weighed heavily on his conscience. Their social circle became another source of friction when Rebecca invited them to an upscale restaurant to celebrate her engagement to her wealthy boyfriend. Sable spent the entire evening in visible discomfort, her second-hand dress seeming shabby next to Rebecca's designer outfit and sparkling engagement ring that probably cost more than Dante's annual salary. When Rebecca's fiancé casually mentioned their upcoming honeymoon in the Maldives, Sable excused herself to the bathroom and returned with red-rimmed eyes. "I can't do this anymore," Sable whispered to Dante in the restaurant parking lot afterward. "I'm tired of being the poor friend, the one everyone feels sorry for. Do you know what Rebecca asked me tonight? She asked if I needed help paying for dinner." The humiliation was unbearable. Dante reached for her hand, but she pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself as if shielding against his touch. The gap between them felt insurmountable, widened by secrets he couldn't share and dreams he couldn't fulfill without revealing everything. Marcus Thompson's presence in Sable's life grew more prominent as he began timing his salon visits to coincide with her shifts. He would arrive with expensive coffee for the staff, always making sure to hand Sable her cup personally with a smile that lingered a moment too long. Their conversations gradually shifted from polite customer service to personal exchanges about ambitions, dreams, and disappointments. Thompson was a skilled listener who validated her frustrations about financial limitations and painted vivid pictures of the life she could have with someone who truly appreciated her worth. At home, Dante struggled with increasingly urgent phone calls from his father's legal team. The lawyers explained that his 36th birthday deadline was approaching rapidly, and decisions needed to be made about assuming control of Kingsley Empire. The family's board of directors was growing restless, and competitors were beginning to circle like vultures, sensing potential weakness in the leadership transition. But every time Dante considered revealing his true identity to Sable, he remembered how her eyes lit up when she talked about Thompson's wealth, and doubt crept in about her true feelings for him. The breaking point came when Dante attempted one final gesture to save their marriage without revealing his secret. He used a small portion of his hidden resources to plan a surprise dinner for their third wedding anniversary, complete with her favorite flowers, candles, and the expensive wines she'd admired, but they'd never been able to afford. He spent hours preparing her favorite meal, setting their small dining table as elegantly as possible, and rehearsing words that might convince her of his love and commitment to their future together. But Sable arrived home 3 hours late, her phone buzzing with messages that made her smile in ways Dante hadn't seen in months. She barely glanced at the romantic setup, instead focusing on typing responses to whoever was capturing her attention so completely. When she finally looked up, her expression was more annoyed than touched by his efforts. "Dante, this is sweet, but we need to talk about something important," she said, her tone indicating this conversation wouldn't be the romantic reconciliation he'd hoped for. "I've been thinking about us, about our future, and I don't think we want the same things anymore," Sable continued, her words carefully rehearsed as if she'd been practicing the speech. "I need time to figure out what I really want from life. This apartment, this constant worry about money, this feeling like I'm watching everyone else live the life I'm supposed to have. I can't do it anymore. I think we should take a break from our marriage." The candles Dante had lit flickered in the silence that followed, their warm light seeming to mock the coldness that had entered their home. He wanted to tell her everything in that moment, about the billions waiting for him, about the penthouse he could move them to tomorrow, about the life of luxury he could provide. But her phone buzzed again, and when she smiled at the message, Dante realized that even his wealth might not be enough to win back a heart that was already turning elsewhere. As Sable retreated to their bedroom to pack a bag for what she called a few days to think, Dante stood alone among the remnants of his failed romantic gesture, understanding that their marriage was hanging by a thread that was about to snap completely. The next evening marked what should have been a celebration of their third wedding anniversary, but instead became the final nail in their marriage's coffin. Sable returned home at nearly 10 o'clock, her designer handbag, a gift from someone who clearly wasn't Dante, hanging casually from her shoulder. She barely acknowledged the wilted flowers still sitting on their dining table, remnants of his abandoned romantic gesture. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages that brought secretive smiles to her face, and each notification felt like another dagger in Dante's chest. "We need to discuss our future," Sable announced without preamble, settling onto their worn couch with the confidence of someone who had already made up her mind. "I've been thinking during my time away, and I realize we're fundamentally incompatible. You're content with this small life, this constant struggle, but I have bigger dreams. I refuse to spend my 30s clipping coupons and worrying about rent." Her words were delivered with surgical precision, each one designed to cut away any hope Dante might have harbored for reconciliation. Dante sat across from her, his heart breaking as he watched the woman he loved systematically dismantle their marriage. "Sable, what if I told you that things could change? What if I could promise you that our financial situation isn't permanent?" His voice carried a desperate edge, and for a moment he considered revealing everything: the trust funds, the empire, the billions that could transform her life overnight. but something in her expression stopped him, a coldness that suggested her decision went beyond mere money troubles. Empty promises, Dante. That's all you've ever given me, Sable replied with a dismissive wave. I've wasted 3 years waiting for someday and eventually. Meanwhile, I watch other women my age living the lives they deserve. Do you know what Marcus told me today? He said a woman like me shouldn't have to choose between love and financial security, that the right man would provide both without making excuses. The mention of Marcus Thompson's name confirmed Dante's worst suspicions about where his wife had been spending her time away from home. Before Dante could respond, his phone rang with an insistent buzz that he recognized as his father's emergency ringtone. Marcus Kingsley's voice was sharp and urgent when Dante answered. Son, the board convened an emergency meeting today. Your cousin Victor is making moves to challenge your succession, claiming you have abandoned your responsibilities to the family legacy. You have exactly 24 hours to make a decision about taking control of the empire, or the board will be forced to consider alternative leadership arrangements. The irony wasn't lost on Dante. At the exact moment his wife was leaving him for his perceived poverty, his father was demanding he claim a $12 billion inheritance. I understand, Dad. I'll call you back within the hour with my decision, he said quietly, aware that Sable was watching him with newfound curiosity. When he hung up, she was staring at him with an expression that mixed suspicion with something that might have been regret, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place in her mind. Who was that, and what were you talking about? Sable demanded, her voice sharper now. That didn't sound like any conversation about office politics or tax files. You mentioned a board and some kind of succession. What aren't you telling me, Dante? For a brief moment, he saw a flicker of the woman he'd fallen in love with, the one who had been curious and engaged rather than bitter and dismissive. But it was too late. The damage had been done, and her betrayal with Marcus Thompson had poisoned any chance of rebuilding trust. It doesn't matter anymore, Dante said with quiet resignation, reaching into their shared desk drawer and pulling out the divorce papers he'd hoped never to use. He'd had them prepared months ago when he first sensed the growing chasm between them, though he'd prayed they would never be necessary. If you want your freedom so badly, then take it. Sign these, and you can start your new life tomorrow. His voice was steady, but inside his heart was shattering into pieces that he wasn't sure would ever fit back together properly. Sable's eyes widened as she recognized the official documents, but instead of shock or sadness, her expression showed relief mixed with something that looked almost like triumph. You had these prepared already? How long have you been planning this? She took the pen he offered and began scanning the papers with the efficiency of someone eager to complete an unpleasant task. This makes everything easier. I was dreading having to explain to you that I'd found someone who could give me the life I deserve. Marcus Thompson, I assume? Dante asked, though he already knew the answer. Sable nodded without shame, her signature flowing across the divorce decree with confident strokes that erased 3 years of marriage in seconds. He understands my worth, Dante. He sees my potential and wants to invest in my dreams rather than holding me back with fears about money. Each word was like salt poured into an open wound, but Dante maintained his composure, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of seeing how deeply her betrayal had affected him. As Sable gathered her belongings, chattering excitedly about her plans with Marcus Thompson, Dante felt a strange sense of liberation mixing with his heartbreak. She was choosing to leave without ever knowing what she was walking away from, and that decision revealed everything he needed to know about her character. She loved the idea of wealth more than she had ever loved him, and her betrayal, while painful, had actually freed him from a relationship built on false foundations. I'll be staying with Marcus until I find my own place, Sable announced as she packed her designer clothes, gifts from her new benefactor that Dante was only now recognizing for what they truly were. His apartment in Lincoln Park is beautiful. Nothing like this cramped little space. You'll probably be happier here alone anyway, living your small, simple life without anyone expecting more from you. Her words were meant to wound, but instead they clarified everything for Dante about the future he needed to choose. After Sable left with her suitcases and her dreams of luxury, Dante sat alone in their empty apartment, staring at the signed divorce papers that had just made him a free man. His phone buzzed again with another urgent call from his father's lawyers, but this time he answered with a clear mind and a definitive answer. Prepare the succession document, as he told them firmly. I'll be taking control of Kingsley Empire and effective immediately, and draft a complete acquisition proposal for Thompson Investment Group. I want every detail about their business operations, financial vulnerabilities, and leadership structure on my desk by tomorrow morning. The transformation had begun, and Marcus Kingsley's son was finally ready to claim his birthright, armed with painful wisdom about the difference between love and greed. 1 month after the divorce papers were signed, Dante's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Gone was the modest accountant who worried about rent payments and clipped grocery coupons. In his place stood the rightful heir to Kingsley Empire, operating from a $15 million penthouse in downtown Chicago that offered panoramic views of the city he was beginning to reshape through strategic business decisions and carefully planned acquisitions. The penthouse itself was a testament to understated luxury: floor-to-ceiling windows, imported marble surfaces, and custom furniture that cost more than most people's annual salaries. But what truly marked Dante's transformation wasn't the material wealth surrounding him. It was the quiet confidence with which he now carried himself, the way he commanded rooms full of seasoned executives, and the strategic brilliance he brought to every business decision that crossed his mahogany desk. Meanwhile, Sable had settled into what she believed was her dream life with Marcus Thompson. His Lincoln Park apartment was indeed luxurious by her previous standards: granite countertops, a walk-in closet, and a view of the lake that she photographed constantly for social media. Thompson showered her with the attention and expensive gifts she'd craved, taking her to upscale restaurants where she could finally order without checking prices, and weekend trips to places she'd only seen in magazines during her marriage to Dante. The business world was buzzing with speculation about the mysterious new chairman of Kingsley Empire. Financial newspapers ran headlines about the phantom billionaire who had emerged seemingly overnight to take control of one of America's most secretive and powerful conglomerates. The identity of this heir remained carefully guarded, with only a select circle of board members and senior executives knowing that Dante Kingsley had finally claimed his inheritance and was wielding it with surgical precision. Rebecca, Sable's closest friend, found herself in an unusual position of witnessing Dante's dramatic transformation without recognizing him. During a charity gala at the Palmer House Hilton, she spotted a strikingly handsome man in an impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit stepping out of a $3 million Bugatti Chiron. The man's confident posture and the way security personnel deferred to him suggested enormous wealth and influence. But his face was partially obscured by the angle and distance, and his sophisticated styling was so different from the humble accountant she remembered. "Did you see that man with the Bugatti?" Rebecca whispered to her fiancé later that evening. "He had this presence, like he owned everything around him." The valet practically bowed when he handed over the keys. She snapped a photo from across the hotel lobby, but the image was too blurry and distant to make out specific features. Still, something about the man's bearing seemed familiar, though she couldn't quite place where she might have encountered such obvious wealth and power before. Dante had begun implementing his vision for Kingsley Empire's expansion into philanthropy through the Kingsley Foundation, a charitable organization that focused on education initiatives and small business development in underserved communities. The foundation's first major project involved funding scholarships for students from low-income families, providing opportunities that Dante knew could transform entire generations. His approach to philanthropy was hands-on and personal, reflecting lessons learned during his years living modestly among working-class families. At the same time, Dante was quietly conducting what he called due diligence research into Marcus Thompson's business operations. Thompson Investment Group, while successful on the surface, had built its reputation on aggressive tactics that often bordered on unethical. The company specialized in hostile takeovers of smaller firms, stripping them for assets, while laying off longtime employees and selling valuable properties to maximize short-term profits. Thompson's methods had earned him wealth, but also a growing list of enemies among business leaders who valued integrity over quick returns. What Sable didn't know was that her new boyfriend's company was facing serious financial pressures from several directions. Thompson had overextended himself on leveraged buyouts, betting heavily on market conditions that were beginning to shift unfavorably. His aggressive expansion strategy had left the company vulnerable to the kind of strategic pressure that someone with Dante's resources and business acumen could apply with devastating effectiveness. The irony of Sable's situation was becoming increasingly apparent to those who knew the truth. She had left her husband for his supposed poverty, only to attach herself to a man whose wealth was built on questionable foundations and whose business empire was far more fragile than the $12 billion legacy that Dante had inherited. While she posted Instagram photos of her new luxury lifestyle, completely unaware that her ex-husband could have bought her a dozen of Thompson's apartments without making a meaningful dent in his net worth. Dante's daily routine now involved morning briefings with investment advisors, afternoon meetings with foundation directors, and evening strategy sessions with his father's former confidants, who helped him understand the full scope of his inheritance. The weight of responsibility was enormous. Thousands of employees depended on Kingsley Empire for their livelihoods, and the company's investment decisions affected entire industries and economic sectors. But despite the overwhelming nature of his new role, Dante found genuine satisfaction in using his power responsibly. Unlike Thompson's predatory business model, Dante focused on sustainable growth, employee welfare, and long-term value creation. He approved raises for custodial staff, implemented comprehensive healthcare benefits for part-time workers, and established mentorship programs that helped young professionals advance their careers within the organization. The foundation work particularly energized him, as it allowed him to address systemic inequalities he'd witnessed firsthand during his years of deliberate modesty. When he approved funding for a new community center in his old neighborhood, Dante felt more fulfillment than any luxury purchase could have provided. This was the kind of meaningful impact that his wealth could achieve when wielded with purpose rather than mere self-indulgence. As the month progressed, subtle signs began appearing that Thompson's business empire wasn't as stable as it appeared. Industry analysts noted unusual trading patterns in Thompson Investment Group's stock, and business journalists started asking pointed questions about the company's debt-to-equity ratios and cash flow projections. But Thompson himself remained confident and continued spending lavishly on Sable, apparently unaware that a storm was gathering that would soon test the foundation of everything he'd built. The stage was set for a reckoning that would reveal the true character of everyone involved. The collapse of Marcus Thompson's empire began on a Tuesday morning with a phone call that changed everything. Thompson Investment Group's largest client, a pension fund worth $200 million, suddenly withdrew their account following an anonymous tip about questionable investment practices and potential regulatory violations. Within hours, 3 more major clients followed suit, creating a domino effect that sent Thompson scrambling to maintain liquidity while projecting confidence to his remaining investors. Sable noticed the change in Thompson's demeanor immediately. The man who had once exuded unshakable confidence now spent hours on frantic phone calls, his voice rising with each conversation as he tried to stem the bleeding from his rapidly deteriorating business situation. The expensive dinners stopped, the weekend shopping trips were postponed indefinitely, and Thompson's Lincoln Park apartment suddenly felt less like a luxury retreat and more like a pressure cooker filled with mounting tension and unspoken fears. "It's just a temporary setback," Thompson assured Sable when she questioned him about the sudden lifestyle changes. "Some competitors are playing dirty, spreading rumors to steal my clients. But I'll bounce back stronger than ever." His words carried forced optimism, but Sable could see the stress lines deepening around his eyes and the way his hands trembled slightly when he thought she wasn't watching. The man she'd believed could provide unlimited security was revealing himself to be far more vulnerable than she'd ever imagined. By the end of the week, Thompson's financial house of cards had completely collapsed. A coordinated investigation by federal regulators, triggered by meticulously documented evidence of securities fraud and insider trading, resulted in frozen assets and criminal charges. The same apartment that Sable had thought represented her escape from financial worry was suddenly under government seizure as part of an ongoing investigation into Thompson's business practices. With nowhere else to go, Sable found herself forced to return to the modest apartment she'd once shared with Dante, only to discover that someone had purchased the building and implemented dramatic improvements. The new owner had paid double the market value to acquire the property, then immediately began renovations that transformed the aging complex into a showcase of modern efficiency and comfort. Long-term tenants received generous relocation assistance that allowed them to retire comfortably, while others were offered lease renewals at below-market rates in beautifully updated units. The mysterious benefactor's generosity extended beyond mere property improvements. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly widow from the first floor, had been struggling to pay for her late husband's medical bills when an anonymous donation appeared that completely cleared her debt and established a trust fund for her remaining years. Similar acts of unexpected kindness touched every family in the building, creating an atmosphere of grateful bewilderment about their unknown guardian angel's identity and motivations. Meanwhile, Rebecca's social circle was buzzing with excitement about an exclusive charity auction at Emmy's Four Seasons, where Chicago's elite gathered to support educational initiatives for underprivileged youth. The event's main sponsor was the Kingsley Foundation, and whispers circulated about the mysterious philanthropist who had recently donated $50 million to establish new scholarship programs. Rebecca attended with her fiancé, hoping to network with the city's power brokers and perhaps catch a glimpse of the elusive benefactor. The moment of revelation came when Rebecca spotted the evening's keynote speaker stepping up to the podium. The man was impeccably dressed in a midnight blue Armani suit that probably cost more than her car, his presence commanding immediate attention from the assembled crowd of wealthy donors and influential business leaders. But when he turned to address the audience, Rebecca's champagne glass slipped from her nerveless fingers and shattered on the marble floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," the speaker began with quiet authority, "I'm honored to introduce myself as Dante Kingsley, chairman of Kingsley Empire and founder of the Kingsley Foundation." Rebecca stared in shock at the transformed figure before her. The same man she'd known as Sable's modest, struggling husband was now revealed as one of America's most powerful businessmen. The confident bearing, the obvious wealth, the way seasoned executives deferred to his every word, everything suddenly made perfect sense. Rebecca's mind raced as she processed the implications of what she was witnessing. The blurry photos she'd taken of the man with the Bugatti, the mysterious phantom billionaire that financial newspapers had been speculating about, the anonymous donor who'd been transforming their old neighborhood, it had all been Dante. Sable had divorced a man worth billions, completely unaware of what she was walking away from in her pursuit of Thompson's comparatively modest wealth. Unable to contain her shock, Rebecca immediately called Sable from the hotel bathroom. "You're not going to believe what I just discovered," she said, her voice trembling with excitement and disbelief. "Remember Dante, your ex-husband? He's here at this charity gala, and Sable, he's not who we thought he was. He's the chairman of Kingsley Empire. That's a $12 billion company. He's been the mysterious billionaire heir that everyone's been talking about in the business news." The phone line went silent for a long moment before Sable's voice came through, hollow and barely audible. "That's impossible. Dante was an accountant. He made $45,000 a year. We clipped coupons and worried about rent every month." But even as she spoke the words, fragments of memory began falling into place. The expensive watch she'd glimpsed once in his drawer, the mysterious phone calls about family assets, the way he'd always seemed oddly unconcerned about their financial struggles. "Sable, I'm looking at him right now," Rebecca continued urgently. "He just announced a $100 million expansion of scholarship programs. There are billionaires in this room treating him like royalty. And here's the thing that's really going to shock you. Remember Thompson Investment Group? The company just got shut down by federal investigators. Dante's company was somehow involved in exposing their illegal practices. Your ex-husband essentially destroyed your new boyfriend's business empire." The full scope of Dante's calculated response to her betrayal became clear to Sable in that moment. He hadn't just moved on from their divorce. He had systematically dismantled the life she'd chosen over him, using resources she never knew he possessed. Thompson's downfall wasn't bad luck or business competition. It was precision-targeted justice delivered by a man who had the power to topple entire corporations when they threatened his interests or operated unethically. Sable ended the call and sat in stunned silence in her old apartment, surrounded by the modest furniture she'd once despised, but that now represented everything she'd lost through her own short-sighted choices. The man she'd dismissed as financially inadequate had been hiding wealth beyond her wildest dreams, while the man she'd chosen for his apparent security had built his empire on fraud and deception that was always destined to collapse. The irony was suffocating. She had traded a genuine fortune for fool's gold, and in doing so had revealed her own character in ways that could never be undone. As sirens wailed in the distance, probably heading to arrest Thompson on federal charges, Sable realized that her pursuit of financial security had left her more vulnerable and alone than she'd ever been in her modest life with Dante. The Kingsley Empire building stood like a gleaming monument to corporate power in Chicago's financial district, its 60-story glass facade reflecting the morning sun as Sable approached with trembling hands and a heart full of desperate hope. Security guards in the marble-lined lobby recognized her immediately, not as the wife of their chairman, but as someone whose presence had been anticipated and prepared for. They escorted her to a private elevator that whisked her directly to the executive floor without the usual protocols or waiting periods. Dante's corner office was a study in understated elegance. With floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city, he now helped shape through his business decisions. When Sable entered, she barely recognized the man sitting behind the imposing mahogany desk. Gone was any trace of the modest accountant she'd married. In his place sat a figure of quiet authority whose very presence commanded respect and attention from everyone who entered his sphere of influence. "Hello, Sable," Dante said without looking up from the financial reports he was reviewing. His voice carried the same gentle tone she remembered, but underneath lay a steel foundation that hadn't existed during their marriage. When he finally raised his eyes to meet hers, she saw a man who had discovered his true power and learned to wield it with surgical precision. "I heard about Marcus Thompson's legal troubles. I hope you weren't too adversely affected by his poor business decisions and ethical lapses." The casual way he referenced Thompson's downfall made it clear that Dante's role in orchestrating the collapse had been deliberate and thorough. Sable realized she was looking at a man who had methodically dismantled her new life not out of petty revenge, but as a natural consequence of exposing corruption and protecting the broader business community from Thompson's predatory practices. The elegant brutality of his response to her betrayal left her speechless for several moments. "Dante, I made a terrible mistake," Sable began, her voice cracking with emotion as she struggled to find words adequate to address the magnitude of her error in judgment. "I had no idea who you really were, what you could have given me, what we could have built together. I was so focused on what I thought I needed that I completely failed to see what I actually had. Can you ever forgive me? Is there any chance we could try again?" Dante set down his reports and studied her face with the same analytical intensity he brought to complex business negotiations. She was still beautiful, still the woman who had captured his heart years ago, but the desperation in her eyes and the calculated nature of her apology revealed truths about her character that couldn't be ignored or forgotten. "Sable, what exactly are you apologizing for? Leaving me or leaving my money? Because the way you're looking at this office, at my suit, at everything around us suggests you're more sorry about the fortune you missed than the marriage you destroyed." His words cut through her prepared speech like a blade, exposing the shallow foundations of her regret. Sable tried to protest, to claim that her feelings were genuine and unrelated to his newfound wealth, but they both knew her protests rang hollow. The woman who had mocked him for his modest lifestyle and left him for Thompson's comparative wealth was now asking for another chance because she discovered her mistake had cost her access to billions rather than thousands. "I loved you completely, Sable," Dante continued, his voice growing softer but more final with each word. "I was prepared to share everything with you. Not just my money, but my dreams, my struggles, my future. I chose to live simply because I wanted to find someone who would love me for who I am, not what I could buy for them. Your decision to leave me for Marcus Thompson answered every question I had about your true priorities and character." From his desk drawer, Dante withdrew a cashier's check made out to Sable Montgomery for $100,000. The amount was simultaneously generous and insulting, enough to represent genuine kindness, but a fraction of what she could have had as his wife. "This will help you rebuild your life with dignity," he explained, as he slid the check across the polished surface. "Consider it a parting gift from someone who once loved you very much, but who now understands that love and greed cannot coexist in the same heart." Sable stared at the check through tears that blurred her vision, understanding that it represented both Dante's generosity and his final rejection. The man she dismissed as financially inadequate was offering her more money than she'd ever possessed, while simultaneously making it clear that their relationship was irrevocably finished. She had chosen Thompson's fool's gold over Dante's genuine treasure, and the consequences of that choice would follow her for the rest of her life. "I hope you find happiness," Dante said as he stood to indicate their meeting was over. "But more importantly, I hope you learn to find it in something deeper than material possessions or social status. The woman I married had dreams and ambitions beyond luxury brands and expensive restaurants. Perhaps someday you'll rediscover that person and build a life based on more substantial foundations than wealth and appearance." 6 months later, Dante's life had transformed in ways that extended far beyond business success and financial achievement. At a community center groundbreaking ceremony in his old neighborhood, he met Sarah Williams, a dedicated kindergarten teacher whose passion for education and genuine care for underprivileged children resonated deeply with his own philanthropic values. Sarah knew nothing about his wealth when they first connected over shared concerns about funding for arts programs. Their relationship developed naturally, built on common interests, shared values, and mutual respect rather than financial considerations or social ambitions. Sarah's modest apartment, her secondhand car, and her genuine contentment with simple pleasures reminded Dante why he'd chosen to live humbly before claiming his inheritance. She loved him for his kindness, his intelligence, and his commitment to making a positive difference in the world, qualities that had nothing to do with his bank balance. The Kingsley Foundation continued to expand under Dante's leadership, funding educational initiatives that transformed entire communities and provided opportunities for thousands of young people who might otherwise have been trapped by economic circumstances. His approach to philanthropy was personal and hands-on, reflecting lessons learned during his years of deliberate modesty among working families who struggled with challenges he could now help them overcome. Meanwhile, Sable used Dante's generous parting gift to open a small beauty salon in a transitional neighborhood, focusing on affordable services for working mothers and students, rather than the high-end clientele she'd once coveted. The experience of losing everything had taught her valuable lessons about the difference between genuine security and superficial wealth. Her new business was modest but honest, built on hard work and community relationships rather than the pursuit of luxury and status. From her salon window, Sable occasionally glimpsed news coverage of Dante's charitable work or business achievements, always accompanied by photos of him with Sarah, a woman whose radiant smile and obvious contentment made it clear that she had found something Sable had never truly possessed. The irony was profound. In choosing greed over love, Sable had lost access to both, while Sarah had gained genuine happiness without ever seeking wealth. As Dante and Sarah planned their wedding, a simple ceremony that would focus on their commitment rather than extravagant displays of wealth, Sable finally understood what she had destroyed through her short-sighted choices. She had possessed the love of a genuinely good man who happened to be extraordinarily wealthy, but her inability to value character over cash had cost her everything that truly mattered in life. The story's final chapter was written not in boardrooms or courtrooms, but in the quiet moments of genuine connection between two people who had learned to treasure love above all material considerations. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the depth of relationships built on trust, respect, and genuine affection. Dante's journey reminds us that authentic love sees beyond surface appearances to recognize the character underneath, while greed blinds us to life's most precious gifts. What would you have done in Dante's position? Would you have revealed your wealth to save the marriage, or chosen dignity over desperation? Share your thoughts and hit that like button if this story touched your heart. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.